way to look at it. That's usually what it is.
We're not KQ, so we're not going for the critique extended permutation. You should start the argument they made that when it's just a question the best policy option proves our counterplay is competitive. They say that our argument about logic proves our argument because the logic or the only logical interpretation of the plaintiffs. They no longer apply the deadline, which means that it is no longer in existence for any purpose. The counterplan says instead of removing the entirety of the deadline, we only limit it to its application to Jordan. This argument doesn't make any, or none of their competition arguments make any sense unless the status quo does not include Jordan. No piece of evidence about that in the 2AC proves they have no competition argument now. The counterplan at the top conditionality or interpretation. We get a test and test of the F means we get counterplan criticism, logical policy making, doing nothing. Its best doesn't make sense to do the plan just because it's slightly less bad seconds. 2AC add-ons, banning style ethics, policy add-ons, otherwise ask can just pivot to one direction, reframe the debate. The 2AC offensive discourse plan, bad plan conundrum, teams with offensive discourse be punished not as the forces, their interpretation forces sacrifice other options to read important social arguments, advocacy skills, thinking, and a broad range of worlds force 2AC to read the best answers, arguing from multiple perspectives, doesn't hurt negative advocacy skills, still limited to two options, not infinite numbers constrained, two tests and tests of advocacy, after side by justifies to get a set topic link to prepare for one section depth, we have to prepare for the whole negative side, consult condition counterpoints are not competitive, there are no topic generics in the literature, airs that can't throw after theory, because doesn't for the resolution topicality theory argument, make their skew level arguments from that, more educational now the PICS debate. Versus the PICS are good. Ace point is encourages in-depth debates about the abuse process. This is specifically true in the context of the affirmative because it leads to investigating exactly what types of exactly where the VV system things like remittance flows are necessary. If they're going to make broad sweeping claims about their ability to terminate all remittance flows, they should be ready to defend the implications of that for the implications of that worldwide. Now, Ace point encourages in-depth ad research. I think the argument I made above proves this, but I think if they put something as stupid like no longer apply the entire standard, their plaintiffs I think should be ready to defend it. Also takes on all the predictable arguments. Ace point is the alternative. Is thousands of arguments like, or is things like control conditions, etc., that are worse, and that are worse. The only thing that allows negative flexibility is PICS that allows to gain traction and solve an indefensible status quo. They have no alternative competitive form of policy options. These point is an evidence proves predictable evidence about the remittance flows, and the ass evidence about remittance flows or terminating the global remittance flows proves this argument is directly connected to the plaintext. East point is discourages fake plan writing means that we lead or encourage teams to fully consider all of the parts of the policy option. It means we turn the best policy option standard they read on, we control the best policy option argument they made on the criticism permutation to the counterplan. I've made a couple arguments and explained why their logic makes absolutely no sense because the plain text says no longer apply the VV standard, which means that the only way this argument makes sense is if Jordan was not included in the existing VV standard. Enemy permutations is severance, which includes the permutation they made at the bottom. Ace point is textual, no longer applies means the F forfeits the right to apply the VV standard. The counterplan does not just say no longer apply and then limit it to Jordan. Jordan is already limited, or already has the VV date standard applied, which means that the counterplan only limits it, but does not remove the entirety of the VV standard. These point is functional. The affirmative eliminates the entire deadline. The negative only limits it to one country. It's functionally less than the plan. I have no idea why they should get this permutation. It doesn't make any sense. I think all the arguments made on PICS good, a reason why you should default. Now you should err negative on any risk the counterplan is competitive. Now they make this argument. There's no net benefit because the internal link argument is terrible. The first is our internal link is actually really good. The multiplier effect proves that things like production have a resounding effects, and household purchases have resounding effects. The lack of access to basic necessities, which is what happens in a world without remittances, leads to massive entitlement spending that pulls major investment dollars out, and leads the banking sector to collapse. Best evidence on this question, and it's also this is a gut check. 23% of their GDP is remittances from the United States economy. Really, you don't think if they lost 23% of the GDP would prove? Now, cross-text answer also proves that the link argument or answer about how the millions of people waiting in the backlog proves the link argument is true, and the argument that they destroy the entirety of global remittance flows proves the magnitude of our link argument because the ability or the means that it destroys all or it distracts all the people who are currently thinking about coming to it leads to all the immediate family members from Jordan getting in, which means no remittance are sent back. It means high risk of the disad. I don't think they did enough work here. You should not give them any new applications. Now the disad outweighs intrinsic case. Ace point is Middle Eastern instability, most likely some nuclear war. The comments out. Probably the fanatical group within the regime of the faction emerging split in leadership will gain control of nuclear weapons and uses inside the Munich cannot be categorically ruled out. The Middle East violence region of the witness much violence and military force of risk that nuclear weapons be used in the Middle East is greater than any other regions of the greater the rest of the super Western core rules of behavior and channels dialogue capable of reducing risk do not yet exist. That it escalates nuclear war. Most probable D95. The lack of regional alliance can lead to a war between great powers of the United States. Check on checking the violence will lead to further lead to violence between that will lead to more states developing nuclear weapons that will make mark increase the vulnerability of the United States direct attack US policy aimed at establishing an international peacekeeping system that head off increasing number of conflicts and transitory economy impacts which internally turns there may be projection arguments for 7 the global security environment will shift in the most unfavorable direction. Death and destruction will transcend geopolitical boundaries spill over to the neighboring regions. Calls for intervention will result in the U.S. becoming involved against American nations must find offering opportunities for young men will require skills in guerrilla warfare making them attractive recruits for Al-Qaeda and affiliated terrorist organizations. In fact, the regional war of the world economy go far beyond foolish shipping lines with capacities. The instability of the Middle East negatively affects global commodity prices, foreign exchange rates, and other facets of the global economy. This card internally turns every one of the scenarios that they talked about. I don't think I should have to reinvent the wheel on the 2 and R. That argument on Jordanian stability solves terrorism throughout the region. Terror and hate. The United States and Jordan have interest in moderate prosperous and stable Middle East. Although Jordan is under the important geographic cross with the Middle East has been deeply involved in many of the most important events of the region's recent history. Importance of increase of Jordan has emerged as a vital U.S. ally in the region to stabilize Iraq and also resist violent extremism and terrorism throughout the region means we control the direction. The status quo solves all other arguments about Al-Qaeda joining with Mar Salvatrucha because and terrorism spilling over because all of those things are going to be solved from the Middle East side. Now there one and see Ryan's evidence is also specific to the remittances the U.S. indicates drives are that they drive a large portion of the Jordanian economy. This is IAMTN and 9. Jordan gets most of its money from the U.S. may help explain the importance and the instability spills over. This court has been attended. Egypt and the Jordanian states are already caught up in Israel's Palestinian Jordan security and stability is critical. The security of West Bank and Israel-Palestinian peace have more evidence that they are a model for the stability throughout the region. USA and 6 Jordan continues to play a vital role in the Middle East and both as a key U.S. ally on the war and terror and a model of reform for the rest of the Arab world. The role is enhanced by major reform initiatives that are already taking place. They've also conceded EU evidence indicates any risk of a failed state leads to a domino effect. The collapse of the total leads to a massive instability throughout the global world economy that turns their Latin American stability advantage. Now there are link turns on the case only applied to Latin America do not apply to the counterpoint side. Any news denying the South American countries or South American countries were expected to do deep recession and rising unemployment. The U.S. by countries in South American, South Asian, East Asia are expected to continue to rise despite the economic slowdown. Now they make these arguments about they make these solvency deficit arguments. Foreign currency inflation drives Jordanian growth. The argument is backwards and view. Sandos intend that the Jordanian remittance is the largest source of foreign currency which provide the national economy through increased consumption and investment lead to the direct increase in total demand. Here's the framing question for solvency deficit. They have to have a piece of evidence that specifically applies their theoretical arguments about remittances to Jordan. They say their piece of evidence only says they might be directed to investment in general. Our piece of 1 and C evidence is conclusive that it is directed towards investment in the context of Jordan. Now their permutation to both I've explained why that's severance above. Now also all the arguments are backwards for Jordan. Remittances encourage fiscal adjustment to prevent inflation. Structural reform means we solve the reform arguments as on. And for the importance of countries remittances, Jordan economies while broadening the banking sector remittances cover 40% of total foreign currency deposits. Most of the deposits tend to be stable and advantage for the banks to extend beyond an increase in deposits. New customers will open bank accounts for remittances, bringing a host of other businesses later. The importance of remittances have been increased over time. Remittances have boosted the disposable income of individuals in Jordan. Remittances contribute to the economies of foreign exchange reserves considered to be one of the most least volatile sources of foreign exchange earnings. Remittances show remarkable stability. Retirement remittances can be used to raise external funding through securitization. Therefore, contribute to the country's fiscal adjustment and reform process. Also, structural reform policies high now solves their other solvency and Nuzzle and 5 the reforms for Jordan target fiscal and monetary policy to Jordan reform efforts been supported by agreements with IMF and World Bank. Reflecting the implementation of structural reform policy, the joining the economies register a high rate of economic growth, low inflation, increased foreign exchange reserves, the economies well, but continue to path of the high growth, increase in employment opportunities, and the living standards solves their corruption argument. Also, their currency appreciation argument doesn't apply to Jordan economics wealth and all attend. Jordan has been able to pay more trade jobs out where the peg of Jordanian dinar to the U.S. dollar is offered an appropriate nominal anchor fixing inflation and has improved financial stability of the volatile region. Now they make this export decline argument. This is backwards in Jordan. This room is 5. The remittances are important for the Mediterranean economy. They represent 3.5% of the GNI, reaching 20% Jordan. Remittances over 9 times FDI and 6 times foreign aid and average triple the tourism receipts represent 75% of Jordan's total revenue from export. Remittances are important, particularly in Jordan, where they account for the largest share of the global GOP. Now the corruption argument, Jordanian corruption is increasing. Now Lynch attend he made the battling corruption a top priority, even when it was found by the rest of the 4 high-level officials of the heart of the regime of corruption. Jordanian Senate usually because they follow the policy. Current round is different. At least 24 people targeted investigation in addition to Al-Qaeda or Al-Qaeda, the Shani and Al-Rashadi, the former petroleum officials. All connected people saw arguments and remittances to keep the Jordanian economy turns against the country. Data in 89 remittances to Jordan with the largest foreign currency earnings, a pillar of economic prosperity. Real inflow around 60% higher than the official receipts. Another expert estimate the real remittances be twice the official receipts.
Did you just read the top one?
Yep.
Okay.
Are you?
Okay.
Sorry, I missed that. Okay. Okay, 10 seconds.
It was more like 20.
Sorry.
I had 17, so it couldn't have been 10.
Your evidence, so the 2AC has read evidence which indicates that the remittances are used at a sort of a microeconomic level unproductively.
The
And then
2NC has read evidence that
right,
indicates in Jordan you are incorrect. Okay, continue.
well, I'm getting there. No, because you've read evidence which indicates that they're undertaking structural economic reforms now. I don't
Right.
understand why that doesn't take out the
Doesn't take out the
first
argument.
piece of evidence that you read, sort of in that block about why remittances are key
Because-
to
sure.
the economic stability. If those developmental reforms are so potent, then why would, at the macro level, those solve any
Couple of reasons. First is
reason
that
why remittances are good
sure.
in the context of Jordan?
Couple of reasons. First is that GDP growth is still dependent upon remittances, and exports are still dependent on remittances now, which means that.
But if they're undertaking structural reforms, why
Right,
wouldn't
the
that
structural
solve
reforms
any
are
reason why
undercut.
remittances
The structural
are
reforms are
important?
undercut because they're being footed by the credit is being lended by banks,
What
which are funded.
evidence do you have which
Our
indicates that
NASM
Jordan
and
is
5
using
evidence indicates-
sovereign debt to finance those reforms?
Our NASM and
Because
5 evidence, that's not what our evidence is. It says that the credit that is being used to finance the reforms is comes from the remittances, or the banks that get remittance funding.
What evidence do you have that indicates that that's sovereign debt? I just don't, tell me which card
We
you're
have a couple of
referencing
pieces of evidence
when it
that talk
says
about
that those reforms are being funded by remittance bonds or by, sovereign debt.
Well, I mean, you have the rest of those cards. I'm not exactly
Well,
sure
so,
which one, but
okay,
I think I told you.
yeah.
I think it's the piece of NASM evidence.
Okay, your Kuwait News evidence says that they are joining with other Arab countries to implement those reforms.
Okay.
Your Lynch evidence also
Doesn't
says
answer the
that
question,
they're.
this
Wait, I
explanation.
just don't understand then how these arguments are consistent.
Is that a question?
Yes, how are these arguments consistent?
Okay. The arguments are consistent because of how I just explained it. The banks who are in charge of the reform. Remember, what the IMF and World Bank do is give money to help give money to banks and set up different infrastructure for the
If
banking
that
industry,
is
stuff
true,
like
that
that.
the IMF and World Bank are providing loans to Jordan, then why the hell are remittances?
This is what our piece of evidence talks about. The lending, the banking industry, which is critical to all of that, is dependent upon remittances.
But you're talking about
And it doesn't matter anyway
lending
because there's a
between the
couple of
IMF
external.
and the World Bank that's
There's
literally
also a
what
couple of
you just
external.
said.
It doesn't really matter because there's a couple. Our evidence indicates those
Okay.
reforms are coming now. The point is that it empirically denies your argument that remittances crush reforms,
Okay, I
that
just
crush
don't
political
understand
will
why
for
that
reforms.
doesn't-
But
okay.
our evidence
Okay.
also indicates that they haven't come yet, which means that the Jordanian economy would collapse in the interim. So I don't think this argument makes that much sense anyway.
And so what evidence do you think establishes the threshold for economic collapse? Is it this 1NC Ryan card?
Listen,
or
we read a bunch of cards that say that they are critical to the Jordanian economy.
You mean this card from 1989?
We've read like a bunch
You've
of evidence.
read evidence from literally the
No.
last 2 years that says that structural reforms are keeping the Jordanian economy high now.
No, we haven't. Our evidence says that structural reforms are coming now, and then we have other evidence that indicates that the remittances are critical to ensuring
The
that they're
country
effective.
data 89 card says traditionally remittances have been important. I'll give you that. You guys taking questions?
Don't worry, Adrian's always on
I think we should
it.
do
Never
like-
seen anybody on top of it as Adrian.
They should be
I'm a
like
big fan of the running clock.
Yeah.
the bathroom design on an airplane. Like you just flip something so that you knows you're prepping. You know, like when you hit the button, all of a sudden a light comes on. Like that's prep.
I think the bathroom sign is
Story
an airplane is an
Aquapado.
interesting analogy.
Yeah, it's a
Of all
weird way
the-
to, I don't know, game shows or chess clock or something.
I was thinking
like
chess
that.
clock. Yeah.
Just like it is.
Aqu-
The story Aquapado.
I like that though. Speaks to us.
Alright, we're good.
In a horrible accent, but it speaks.
Yeah.
You have 1 second, I'm doing math. 754.
Yeah. Laugh it up now, white man.
Speaks
He was
at me.
laughing
It
at
doesn't
20
speak to
years.
me. It speaks at me.
Alright, it's gonna be, the national ID dissad, the politics dissad, the money laundering, dissad, dissad advantage, the Russia advantage,
I'm sorry, which
Which one is that?
Panel going out.
the SLOCs, sorry, I don't know why
Okay.
I put Russia at the top.
It sounded like a little bit.
Yeah,
in
the MS-13 advantage.
I thought it was Russia at first too.
I did.
Yeah.
I give him a pass, but
I have no idea what word
At-
you said.
maybe
I
at
guess
this
whatever
point.
the
Well,
MS-13 stands for, but I have no idea what
Like,
that
you
was.
grab my-
because of his pronunciation.
Yeah. What are the first words out of your mouth on that advantage?
I'm pretty sure
Supposed
it's
to
I had to
be-
read the
it's-
name first of all.
Which was?
It's the Mata Salvatrucha.
I heard Russia.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Then I heard El
All I heard
Salvador,
was
and I was
gay.
like,
Maybe I
"Oh,
shouldn't
no,
have
that's
heard
all I
that."
got."
And the row is too loud.
When you get confused, you're just like Yeltsin. Next.
Wait, sorry, so I missed it.
Yeah, what's after
Right.
Russia?
National ID politics, the MS-13 advantage, the money laundering advantage, and the Latin America advantage.
I think he switched those.
He did.
Okay.
Oh, my bad.
Can we just have it one more time,
Yeah.
man? I mean,
Sorry, now that I've ruined it all. National ID, politics, MS-13, money laundering, Latin America. We good? Okay.
Wait, I'm sorry. MS-13, something, money laundering, Latin.
MS-13, money laundering, Latin America. Okay.
He doesn't know what the advantages are either.
Very good.
If not, we'll figure it out.
National ID just said not going for the we can see the hacking is inevitable and the visa restriction evidence is not about the type of family visa, talking about high school visa. They wouldn't be able to resolve these arguments. Also, the impact we can see the argument that we already had one of the impacts empirically denied no risk of office. So this the politics said we're not going for it. We'll can see that there's no impact to North Korea as well as the steps not key to the line. So even if they go for a link, there's no impact. Their ability to solve this argument with the Navy argument doesn't make any sense. There reason why there's no impact indicates that North Korea would never initiate that type of threat, and because they're deterred by our nuclear weapons, which means the Navy arguments are irrelevant. They couldn't solve this terminal impact to this arguments. Now the Russian advantage at the top. Our Cochrane evidence is pretty good. It indicates that the Panama Canal is not a site of terrorist attack. They have no incentive to do that. They would also they would want to do that at times when they would have a military vessel there, and that they would never know how to do that. So it would decrease the incentive for those to ever do it. Now read the rest of the part of the evidence. This is Cochrane 8. Report by the CRS on the maritime security potential terrorist attacks did not name either as potential location or target the canals. Here, by far the least amount of crude of about 86 named choke points means that there's no incentive for them to attack in that area. And here's more evidence that there's no risk of a terror attack in the region of Latin America. This is Bresky. And 8, there's little evidence that Hezbollah is deliberately present in the area for purpose of money laundering. There's no strong evidence that Middle East terrorists or operatives have much success making inroads in Latin America and no risk of terrorism there. This is Wall and 7 every remarks about the airport departments, movements, and governments in the region as potential threats to U.S. security. This is making mistake. Whatever the views of the U.S. governments, unlike to have offered the terrorists, even Venezuela, which is the Washington is strict anti-American rhetoric. The relations with Iran posting channels better handled through diplomacy and dialogue, not through confrontation. And there's no risk of those type of maritime terror attacks in the canals. This is Patrick and Finelli. And 7 experts estimate the possibility of terrorists obtaining nuclear devices range among the challenges obtaining a device. Experts believe unlikely to carry countries with nuclear weapons materials, knowing that the terrorists would also be technically difficult to assess. So deactivating such a nuclear device attempting to detonate a nuclear device in a maritime terror attack would pose even great operational challenge. Here, I said I don't think there are near time significant likelihood of traditional nuclear device being detonated in the U.S., which means there's no reason why they would want to attack. There's also no incentive for them to do that when they can do things like attack the homeland because they have a symbolic effect. They are not looking to cripple our military, which means those arguments are all not unique. There's also no reason why these Slovakia is necessarily key. Because of 1 and C evidence indicates that they can do things like go around the southern coast, and that is not necessarily key. There's no time frame for any of these types of impact scenarios, or why countries would feel aggressiveness now that just because the Panama Canal has attacked this does not make sense. Now the money laundering advantage at the top, they wouldn't be able to resolve this argument. So we have a couple people all cause this arguments. Ace of point is our piece of Fahar evidence indicates that things like housing and car sales in Mexico are the key places for money laundering. They invest in things like purchasing a bunch of houses because the people to check those records in Mexico are particularly poor at their job, which means there's an increase in money laundering through that method. The second point is Fahar evidence indicates that Mexico is inefficient at prosecuting, which means even if we started to have some type of crackdown, and there was a reduction of remittances, we soon can pick out the bad guys. There would not be prosecution, which means those things would all become irrelevant. Our piece of our evidence also answers their argument that are we not taking into account things like going online proves their argument that the cartels would adapt because they would use things like selling gold on WoW to make a bunch of to transport the money back and forth. That's our evidence indicates that those things are out of the realm of possibility for us to prosecute, which means those are effective means for KU law enforcement, which means we wouldn't ever be able to solve this. And there's no connection to the organized crime of the nuclear transfers, means there's no risk of the impact is outside of hand. And 3, there's no hard evidence to link organized crimes with the nuclear smuggling activities. Nuclear food and nuclear smuggling case involvement, organized crime, and such. Some argue that the groups are likely no interest in dealing with the nuclear material because they're getting sufficient promise or other activities and do not want to jeopardize that. Our piece of Mueller evidence and takes out the warrant for why they would want to do this indicates that there are high costs of trying to do things like shipping a nuclear weapon and the fact that it's hard to detonate those things, which means there are lower reasons why we want to do this. Our piece of Burra evidence indicates that there would be no impact because we wouldn't want to
retaliate, they would do things like domestic terror checkpoints, not go out and start a nuclear conflict, or escalation. The newest evidence includes that we wouldn't retaliate against Kipple at 9 if the U.S. conventional military action, no possible circumstances requires it could use nuclear weapons to deal with non-nuclear threat, the useless and resulting nuclear terrorism, not how to solve the nuclear payloads where we would be not crossing the threshold, and the passive Iraq war, and then we wouldn't, we after the Iraq war, we wouldn't have an incentive to go lash out, and they wouldn't want to use a nuclear weapon, and they couldn't. This is crap on a 9 non-single death that's occurred as a result of nuclear terrorism, not WT. It's not easy to acquire the skills to maintain its constructed nuclear weapons. The U.S. has managed to remain safe for far more dangerous times. U.S. initiative helped the tremendous the threat spread. The centuries means there's no terminal impact to the advantage of Latin America. The advantage to the top. Our evidence is pretty good that indicates that remittances have decreased. Now their evidence just indicates that there would be a rebound for, by about 6%. Our evidence indicates that it's been drastically reduced in the tens of percents, which means even their increases slightly reduced. It doesn't matter if we win that more remittances happen. It just makes all of their linear impact reasons why remittances bad more inevitable. Now the evidence of why would they reduce it was just because they have family members. Or we have a pretty good piece of evidence. I don't think they have a card that answers indicates that most of those remittances still have go because they do things. They go to their grandparents, their cousins, and their nephews. Are all the reasons why they would still remit. Our evidence is pretty good on this question. Also, the second piece of evidence we read, the one is conclusive on the claim that there is a statistical study, and it says that when family reunification happens, there's a doubling in the remittances that go home because there are more people in the United States making more money becoming to send home. So the more family we increase in the United States, so instead of just having a mom remitting to her daughter, only her income, they bring the rest of the family, which increases the amount of income they have, so they remit more back to their home country because they don't have a feel want to send it to their aunts and nephews, and the plan increases the amount of income immigrants households and adds more families who work there, increases remittances while intent family-based immigrants provide contributions to the use economy productive workers, entrepreneurs. They have based immigrants self-elected initial artists potential employment-based immigrants and incomes of family-based immigrants tend to grow rapidly. The incomes of employment-based immigrants affect incomes of two groups that could equalize over crime and increases remittances. Aronson and 9 studies the remittances and how incomes interact. Findings suggest that transfers increase the higher the sender's incomes and remittances are collapsing. Now milestone in 9 remittances flows in Latin America dropped by 11% in 2009, the lowest level since 2006-35. Will have a direct effect on more than 1 million households in Latin America and declining now. Garden 8 no data for remittances flows so actually how we can decline to May 2008 declined to 6.28 million compared to the same period of 2007. Yep.
640.
Jobs 1 and C advantage frontline, and can I see the card that would cause more remittances?
Yeah, I actually can't find that stuff. I took it while I was reading the 1 and C.
No, it can't be.